everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey! We got a bit of a truncated episode today, so we got to get right to it. I'm the Outlaw John Roca. That's Michael Vogel. That's Shannon McClung. We're jumping into our stories. Let's not waste any time. Let's do this thing. All right, thank you all for joining us, but let's start off with our first topic here. The way the show works, each of us brings up a geek news item. We talk about it amongst ourselves and get into a main geek news item. And our geek news item this week, main one, is our review for Future Commandos Episode 3. But we're going to start off with this story, and that's Chris Evans. Chris Evans is coming back to the MCU, but not only is he coming back to the MCU in Avengers Doomsday, but according to my brother on the hot mic, we broke this last night on the show, he is coming back to play Nomad. Now, I know a lot of people thought he was playing Nomad in Avengers Infinity War, in essence, with the beard and the kind of subdued costume colors and what have you. But this is the point. This is the approach that they're taking, is he's going to come back as Nomad, possibly from the Doom universe with Robert Downey Jr. So, Michael Vogel, your thoughts on this? A, do you like that Chris Evans is back? Does it make sense? And B, do you like that he's coming back as Nomad? And what version of Nomad? There's like 4 or 5 different versions of Nomad. What do you think we're getting?
I think it's a good idea. Like, I've talked to a lot of people about the Chris Evans news. The Nomad piece of it is new, but just it broke earlier in the week that Chris Evans was coming back. And I got from a lot of people are they just bringing everybody back now? Like, is Black Widow showing up? Like, are they going to do this? And I totally get that there is this vibe of, shit, we kind of got off of our game and people weren't really loving it. Let's just trot out all of the old favorites. And there definitely could be that. I think this is potentially good because what they're clearly building, like the second that they cast Robert Downey Jr. as Doom, whether you like it or not, the second they cast Robert Downey Jr. as Doom, they are weaving some story that takes what we know of Tony Stark and reinventing that into a Doom for the new universe. Right. So it makes sense if you are going to take our current Avengers in the MCU as they exist and give them their ultimate villain that is a version of Tony Stark. Right. It does make sense as you're breaking story that some version of Steve Rogers should probably enter the story at some point. So there are several ways that I think that this could be really cool. There's absolutely several ways that this could just be a complete like, oh, here fans, here's what you want. But I think it's going to be cool. And the news that he's going to be Nomad, I think makes sense. I think that there's sort of 2 Nomad options. I don't really think any of the versions of Nomad from the comics are anything to be looking at because they're all so specific to specific comic book stories. I think there's 2 tracks of this potential Nomad. One is, this is the Steve Rogers from our universe. And at some point before he ended up where he ended up at the end of Endgame, this shit happened and we're going to get this chapter of his story. Like, Steve Rogers left to return those Infinity Stones. Then he was sitting looking like Joe Biden on the bench and gave Sam the shield. And there's a lot of story in between. So if that Steve Rogers in our universe somehow became Nomad at some point or something of that nature, that works. And then as you said, the other one that I think is maybe a little bit more likely is that whatever happened to turn a Tony Stark from another universe into a Doom, perhaps also sent that Steve Rogers down a road where he became Nomad. And that we're going to get that story to be told. So... or it could be neither of those things, but those 2 seem like the most likely options, at least to theorize around until we get more information.
And just to give it a little bit of background real quick, Nomad, Steve Rogers became Nomad when he became disillusioned with the U.S. government in Captain America number 180. He just makes a complete difference moving away from the Captain American identity. Feeling that he cannot continue to serve America in this latest discovery, has shattered his faith in the nation's status, and he becomes Nomad. Edward Furble became Nomad for like 4 issues or something like that. Then there was Jack Monroe, who was formerly known as the Third Bucky. He became Nomad. Ricky Barnes was the female version of Bucky, became a version of Nomad. And then Ian Rogers is the other one who became Nomad, and he was connected with Arnim Zola. So interesting stuff here. Shannon, A, your thoughts on Chris Evans coming back? B, what Nomad do you want to come back? And let me ask you this, Shannon, is it connected to Thunderbolt Ross becoming the Red Hulk, turning on America as a president, if he's in this universe? And if not, do you think it's the Doom universe that he's Nomad in?
I mean, I think I think the Doom universe is probably the most likely. The most interesting thing is like Chris Evans throughout his time in the MCU, he was obviously very enthusiastic to be there, but he talked about earlier, like it's like once I'm done with this giant contract, I might be done. I might retire. Like he's
Yeah.
like I want to get into directing. Like there are other things that I want to do, and he warmed up to the fandom by the end. But the fact that he's coming back, I do think is very, very big. That whatever idea that they gave him, it excited him enough to jump back into this world. It sure does make sense, especially when you're talking about someone that's become disillusioned with the government. If he is in fact from Downey's Doom world, that this is a world that Doom took over, and being Captain America in that world doesn't work. So he has to find, an alternate path. I mean, in the wake of like Kang Dynasty kind of going by the wayside, there's all these theories online, and who knows what's right and what's wrong. But this whole idea that the old Avengers were basically going to fight an evil version of themselves. Think about like in the Justice League animated series when they took on the Justice Lords. It sounded like that. That was one of the theories that was being bandied about. I like this way more. I like that. Steve Rogers, who basically lost in his world, he's the guy that's potentially coming back. But as Vogel already said, it could be anybody. I mean, like it could be any version of this. Whatever version that they did come up with, it excited someone who thought Steve Rogers was in his rearview mirror to come back. So to me, that's exciting.
Well, that or the giant bucket of money that they pulled up into his driveway with and dumped in the driveway and said, "Here." That might have excited him too. just saying. I don't know that it was altruistic.
But you think he needs another bucket of money?
I feel like here's
the thing about buckets of money. No matter how many buckets of money you have, you're always happy to take more buckets of money.
I guess, but I think with Chris, and I say, first of all, I was happy he was coming back, and I wasn't surprised, as Shannon points out. He has found almost no success as the lead of anything. And Red One is bombing at the box office. Ghosted was terrible. He went and directed a film that nobody went and saw. And yes, he's gotten some nice reviews for the work he's done and on camera or behind the camera. And I think Chris is great for that. He wanted to do something more. But clearly he's chosen some super terrible projects that have done nothing. And look, Robert Downey Jr. is not clean on this either. If it wasn't for Sherlock Holmes, his track record wouldn't be that strong as well outside of the MCU. So it's
there's that Oscar that he got.
Well, yes, but as a part of, but not as the lead though, right? But
he got an Oscar.
Yeah, I know. So, but the whole situation here is, look at is like Chris, this is a good move, and I think you're right. I think they pitched him the right story. I don't think he would have come back unless it was the right story. He's willing to do cameos like in Free Guy and pop up in Deadpool and Wolverine, but it's got to be the right story because he has a super possessive approach to Captain America. Look, Chris Evans, if you follow Chris Evans on social media, he's a very politically aware person who posts political stuff. He's out there in front of all these causes. So the idea of him coming back as a person who's disillusioned with the government, there's something that works for him, I think, also politically for himself to play this character. And look, how many people nowadays are disillusioned with the government on all sides of the aisle? So it makes sense to bring him back in this way. And of course, Tony versus Cap again it's this gold. So I like the idea.
It's gold, but it's also I think what you just said is the danger. I mean, this is the line that they need to walk. Like, bringing Chris Evans back as Nomad, great. Casting Robert Downey Jr. as Doom, whether you are upset about the idea or not, it is undeniable that reignited a lot of excitement around the idea of this movie. Yes. But if this movie boils down to Cap versus Tony again, and it doesn't have anything to do with
the new characters
with Sam, with Shang-Chi, with Spidey, with the Fantastic Four. Like, these characters need to work into the story with all of these other characters, because if they do end up falling back on, let's just have the same two actors that we've had from the beginning be the core of this movie, I don't think fans are going to like it. I think we want a little bit of that seasoning, but that seasoning has to work to elevate all the other ingredients in this recipe to the top. If the other ingredients fall down and those become like the prominent things, this stew won't hunt.
Well, let me ask you one last thing, guys. Do you think they're bringing him back as a final hurrah, or do you think they're bringing him back to see how the audience reacts and to possibly open the door for adventures in their universes as alternate universes, or are they just shutting the door on this? Kevin Feige has said in that book, in the MCU book, that, you know, she wants Secret Wars to serve as a, quote, soft reboot. So is that what this, in essence, is going to be? A final goodbye, a final goodbye to everybody and moving on from this?
I don't. Go ahead, Shannon.
Well, yeah, I was going to say, my guess is this is probably one and done, that once the multiverse collapses and the heels of Secret War, they're going to focus on X-Men. I mean, that's kind of my guess, is that this was a break glass in case of emergency option that we brought these guys back. And I kind of feel like if Captain America does reappear in the next phase, it won't be for a minute, and it won't be, or rather, if Steve Rogers reappears, like obviously Sam Wilson is Cap right now. If Steve Rogers reappears, it will be further down the line, and it won't be Chris Evans. That's my guess.
Okay.
Secret Wars in Marvel Comics was the ultimate reboot. Marvel had the ultimate universe where Miles Morales was Spider-Man and Peter Parker was dead. And they had the main Marvel universe where Spider-Man was Peter Parker. And at the end of Secret Wars, when Franklin Richards was like, let's just reboot everything, let's make them universe again, they put Miles Morales into the Marvel universe and he became a mainline character. And now we have two Spider-Man running around, and it's been that way ever since. And so I think along the same lines, this is going to be Marvel's ultimate reboot. This is their way of going, okay, we have some characters we want to keep. We have some characters we want to reboot. We have some things we want to do differently. We maybe want to do a new Iron Man or a new Captain America down the road. We don't know. This is their opportunity to sort of clean slate it and say the multiverse collapsed. Everything is finished. And we are going to restart everything in a world that has mutants in it, and that has this and it has that, and the audience will go with us. So this is their like one shot to go, this is what it is. So I think they're going to really focus on that. I think that they, much like us, are kind of like, we think audiences have had enough of the multiverse. Let's just pick our lane and stick to it and really just get crazy with the X-Men.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Well, speaking of wiping the slate clean, Michael, I think you've got to our next subject here about wiping the slate clean and starting all over. What do you got for us here? Oh,
hold on. I got a little prop for this.
Carrot Top over here with a prop. What do you got there?
That's my celebratory noise because the Sony Spider-Man universe is dead. Kraven the Hunter has killed his final prey, and his prey was the Sony Spider-Man universe. Craven is apparently Johnny, I want to hear from you because I fortunately don't have to go see Craven because you and other people have seen it for us, and your response was enough to make me go, yep, don't need to sit through this one. But from what I've heard from some people is, although Craven is maybe not the worst of the Sony movies, like Madam Web, Venom: The Last Dance, probably actually worse movies, it's the most upsetting because Craven as a character had the most awesome potential and just got wasted. And I think that at this point, after the Madam Web debacle, after Venom: The Last Dance did not perform the way they hoped it would, and then Craven coming out, I think Sony has finally gotten the message, and they have said, okay, we get it. We're going to stop doing this because you all clearly hate this so much. And we're going to focus on Spider-Man 4, and we're going to focus on our animated Spider-Verse movies, and we're going to focus on Spider-Noir. So they seem to have waved the white flag, and we can all breathe a great sigh of relief that this weird experiment that never quite got off the ground is done. How do we feel, boys?
Shannon, what do you think about it?
I mean, when you look at the Sony Pictures universe of Marvel characters, Spumsy, they box office wise, they batted a 500. They did 6 movies, 3 were financially successful, even though the longer the Venom trilogy went on, the law of diminishing returns was kicking in. I think if one of those movies had Morbius hit, especially when they did a second release based off of its Morbin time. If Morpheus had hit, if Madam Web had hit, maybe there would have been life left, and they would have given it one more go. But the fact that Craven was just so, they think it's going to come in maybe lower than Madam Web.
Yeah,
they are sort of acknowledging, like, okay, we tried a thing, it didn't work. Let's focus on the things that people are liking, like the Spider-Verse movies, knowing that the Nick Cage Spider-Man show is coming. Yeah, I mean, I think this was kind of the thing that we all kind of thought from the very beginning was this could work, but ultimately you keep running into the problem of you don't have a Spider-Man in your Spider-Man movies, and when you're taking all these great bad guys and relegating them to anti-hero, it's like you're never going to be able to use them in the capacity that they could have been maybe the most useful. So, you know, RIP Spumsy. Sorry about it.
But I do want to give credit Humberto Gonzalez in the wrap, on the wrap rather. He's the one who wrote this article and broke it down. Got interviews with a number of high level agents and people connected to the Sony studio, and basically they all said they're not going forward with any more of these movies. They're going to focus on a new Spider-Man. So and finishing off Spider-Verse and Spider-Man Noir. So to me, this is something that rarely happens, where the studio actually listens to the audience and stops doing this. We saw this with Transformers, right? People were rebelling against Michael Bay's Transformers. They pivoted to do the Bumblebee movie, and now we had Transformers 1, which I thought was great. They did the Rise of the Beast, which was not that good. So we'll see what the end result's going to be when they find someone else to take control of the Transformers universe fully. But we see this. So occasionally the studios do listen, and it seems like they listen because the money wasn't coming in anymore.
Yeah, they don't necessarily listen to fans. They listen to box office receipts.
Which are the fans, really, are because they're not going to see it, you know, and so that's what they essentially did here. And I think it's finally time. It makes sense. But I also wonder if this opens the door to them negotiating with Andrew Garfield or negotiating with Tobey Maguire to come back and be Spider-Man for their universe. I mean, Tom Holland just signed a production deal with Sony, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, where he's got 3 movies in the pipeline with them. He did Uncharted. He's got a very good relationship with them. But I think we're coming to the end of Tom Holland as Spider-Man. So do they open the door to Miles Morales? Will Tom executive produce a Miles Morales approach to Spider-Man? Will they reboot this whole thing completely? Or will they go back to Toby or Andrew? So there's a lot of questions here with what Sony can do, because they're not letting go of Spider-Man. Anybody dreaming that they're going to sell Spider-Man to the MCU, that's never going to fucking happen. So this is the point that I wonder what they're going to do, who they're going to go after, because there's a lot of creators that are sitting out there without deals that could be interesting to take over a Spider-Man universe. But yeah, Mike.
It's just stupid because I think, as typically is the case, like Hollywood will learn the wrong
not what I
lesson
say,
here.
right? Not what I
No, what you said was great. What you said was great, but like it's just what bothers me about nothing bothers me about, like, I'm happy about this. Like, I'm happy it's done. But you're right. Like, look, we live in a world where Sony has the rights to this entire section of the Marvel has gotten back every section of their universe that they gave to everybody else, but Sony's sitting here with all of Spider-Man's characters and rogues and everything, and it's always a struggle. And particularly with the Spider-Verse movies, it's very clear that we like Spider-Gwen, we like Miles Morales, we like all of these other Spider characters, and if they actually put a modicum of forethought into what they wanted to build, they could have built a very successful side hustle over here where we were very into this version of the Spider thing and doing new takes on everything. And like, they should have learned lessons from their animated Spider-Verse movie, where we got new versions of Doc Ock, new versions of the Green Goblin that were very interesting. And they could have really subverted expectations and done something interesting and surprised us with characters, done kind of basically what Marvel did with the Ultimate Comics back in the day, and created this whole sort of alternative thing that we're like, oh, this is really interesting, while we're continuing to see Peter Parker's adventures in the MCU. And I just feel like it was so mishandled. And so now they're going to be like, well, fans don't want to see this. And I'm like, no, fans just don't want to see shit.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that it's done, but I also feel like they're going to miss the mark on why exactly they failed. Like they're just going to come up with a lot of reasons why fans, it was the market was flooded. People didn't want this. There was too much Spider-Man. You're like, no, we actually just don't like shitty movies.
Yeah. If the same people stay in charge going forward, you're going to get the same kind of movies. And that's not what you want here going forward. So hopefully there's a wholesale change, or they bring in a new executive who's going to be in charge of just the Spider-Man universe. And and picking the filmmakers, picking the approaches, picking the overall story they want to tell. Hopefully that's the approach they take. Because this is, if just stopping to redo it all over again 5 years later isn't going to make any fucking sense, So we will see. Anything more to say on this, or shall we move on to some trailers?
The less said about this Sony Pictures Universal Marvel characters, the better. We will never have to talk about this again.
Yeah, and certainly not up to Craven, because it is. I think it's 15% on Rotten Tomatoes. It's gonna make 15 million, and it's got an over $100 million budget. All right, let's wrap that up. All right, Shannon, let's go to trailers. What do you got?
All right, we got some trailers. The first one, we talked about before, like with Nosferatu coming out on Christmas. It's like, it's an unusual movie to put out on Christmas. Well, guess what? For Valentine's Day, we're going to the entrance to hell. There's a new film coming out called The Gorge. We get our first trailer for The Gorge. This is with Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy from director Scott Derrickson of The Black Phone and Doctor Strange fame. Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy play two elite snipers who are on opposite sides of this giant chasm in the middle of nowhere. He's in West Tower, she's in East Tower. They're stationed there for a year. They're not supposed to talk. And they're trying to figure out what is actually in between them. And Miles Teller's commanding officer says that is the entrance to hell. So the perfect thing to take your sweetheart to. But this one is going to be streaming on Apple. But gentlemen, I'll throw it over to you all first. Johnny, what did you think of our first look at The Gorge?
Look, I love Scott Derrickson. I loved Doctor Strange. We follow each other on Twitter. I loved Black Phone, or I enjoyed Black Phone. Man, this trailer looked like, I get it. It has shades of like old 1980s horror with the gate and other things that you remember from that time. But, you pick two hot, good-looking snipers that happen to be on opposite sides. You pull a little Taylor Swift. Hey, I always love a little Love Actually. And then you throw in a monster in the middle. And I don't know. This felt like they showed the whole movie in the trailer other than the creature. And at the end, I was not excited to see it. So unfortunately, it didn't work for me, even though I sensed what Scott was trying to do. I felt coming out of the trailer like, yeah, fine, I'll watch it on Apple TV at some point. It didn't seem like appointment viewing for me.
Mikey, are you excited by this trailer, or are you like Grumpy McGrumpy Pants up there?
Well, unlike Nosferatu, this totally makes sense. Like, it's a romance. You're releasing it on Valentine's Day. It's a non-conventional romance, but like Nosferatu on Christmas is like that is a hard left. This is hey, we're going to give you a romance, but something you don't expect. I felt completely the opposite of John on this one. I like two hot actors in cool role. Like, not only hot actors, but like, look, Miles Teller, even though all evidence points to the fact that Miles Teller might be kind of an asshole in real life, based on what a lot of people say, he's a great actor. Yes. And Anya Taylor-Joy is a great actress. Like, so I look at this and like, you got two A+ actors kind of doing this thing. You've got them on opposite sides. They're not supposed to talk to each other. They eventually become connected. And then she chases him into hell to save him. Like, I don't know what's not to like about this trailer. Like, this looked super fun to me. Like, I was like, this looks like a blast. And I have a feeling that there's still some more reveals. I don't think they showed us the whole movie. I think probably them kind of connecting with each other is kind of the first half of the movie. But I kind of feel like the mystery of what exactly is down there. I know that his commander says it's the gateway to hell. I don't know that that's 100% the answer. Like, the trailer kind of leans in on what is in this gorge. So I don't think that that's just as simple as, yep, okay, let's go fight the devil. Yep, okay, we're together. The end. Let's kiss. So I'm intrigued. I thought it was intriguing. You had two really great actors. You had an interesting concept. It's really high concept, and it's a romance on Valentine's Day. Like, I'm fucking sold.
Is this a monster meet cute where both of them have to conquer the
It's
monster inside of themselves in order to find love? Oh,
it's
is that what we're talking
100%.
about?
It is you. That trailer is the definition of a monster meet cute. Like, hey, you're a sniper. You're a sniper. Don't
Yeah.
talk to each other. Sup. Like, it's perfect. Hey, you up? What you thinking about?
Oh my God.
Like, it was cute. Like, it was. And I think, like, again, having actors of both Miles Teller and Anya Taylor-Joy's caliber in these roles kind of makes you go, all right, like, I'm down for this. Like, if you had like lesser actors, if you had like the third, fourth choice actors in both of these roles, maybe it would have struck me as a little cheesier. But like, these two are great. So I'm more than happy to watch them fall in love across a chasm filled with demons or whatever the fuck is down there, and then have some fun watching two badass snipers take out a bunch of creatures. I'm like, yep, sign me up. I'm in.
If Scott doesn't end this with Taylor Swift's "You Belong With Me," he's made a mistake. Sorry, Shannon. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I was gonna say I actually enjoyed this trailer as well. The only ding I would give it is the fact that this looks like it was probably filmed to be on the big screen. Like you get those giant wide shots of the two towers, and we're going to be seeing it at home. And granted, some of us have large televisions, not as big as an IMAX screen. But yes, the concept, the performances, I'm actually quite interested in this. And you know, we don't have to wait that long because it's going to be dropping on Apple TV on February 14th. That brings us to our next trailer, something that's going to be hitting the big screens. You know, back in the early 90s, Sam Raimi did this movie called Darkman, starring Liam Neeson, where he was in some sort of experiment and he basically lost the ability to feel pain, and he ended up becoming a pseudo superhero. Well, they have taken that idea and modernized it for the modern day with I lost his name.
Jack Quaid.
Huey. Jack Quaid. I was saying Huey. With this movie called Novocaine. Jack Quaid plays an office drone, meets a gal that he fancies, and you find out that he does have a condition where he can't feel pain. There's a bank robbery. His lady love gets kidnapped. He goes after her. And Ned from Spider-Man is along. Jacob Batalon is along for the ride as well. I thought this looked like a lot of fun. Mikey, you brought it to our attention. What did you think of our first look at Novocaine?
Look, Jack Quaid is like the geek's geek at this point. I mean, he is just like, he shows up everywhere. He, you know, he's in The Boys, he's on Lower Decks, he's Superman in My Adventures with Superman, and he does a great job in all of it. Like, he really just has a great vibe, a great energy. So he's just likable. And so putting him in this concept, I think it really, really works. It almost feels like Huey from The Boys finally gets the right power for Huey. I'm not the most skilled, but you can't really hurt me, so I'm gonna win. And just the sort of silliness of the concept, kind of to your point, Darkman, which was not my favorite movie when it came out,
How dare you?
was just so self-serious. So just like Sam Raimi self-serious. And this movie takes the concept and does the least serious version of it. Like when that dude at the end of the trailer is torturing him and he's like, oh yeah, ooh, it hurts, the pain. Ooh, yeah, that one really hurts. It's just funny. Like, I'm like, this looks like a ton of fun, kind of new take on the superpower superhero genre movie. And you cast the right guy for it. So again, like between this and The Gorge, I was having a good week of trailers.
Johnny, are you with Vogel on this one? Do you prefer Novocaine to Darkman?
Listen, I'm probably one of the last people to defend Sam Raimi on this show, but God damn it, don't you come for Darkman. That is a damn good movie. Julie, him and Frances McDormand. I mean, come on, that's A-level talent. I love that movie, and I hated every one of the other sequels, but I love that movie. You even had Lenny, who was the mentally handicapped guy from LA Law, playing the villain. It was great. Larry Drake, I think is
Dr. Giggles.
Dr. Giggles. Yes. Darkman. Anyway, I thought that was a fun little film. So good reference, Shannon. I didn't even think about connecting them to Darkman, but yeah, absolutely. And Amber Mid-Thunder in here. Great to see her being a part of this. Kind of weird to see her playing sexual moments, but that's on me because I saw her as a badass there in Prey. So, but I like this. I like this connection they have with each other. I like Jack Quaid. And Michael, you absolutely hit it on. He is the geek's geek. We want to see him in everything. We like him immediately. He has that great energy. He brings the roughness of Dennis and the cuteness of Meg. He makes that combo as his parents, and it works for us. And I want to see him in everything. And this looks like a lot of fun. This is like Nobody. This is a little bit like Taken. This is a little bit like one of those like regular dudes who gets involved in a situation. Monkey Man. We saw that with Monkey Man recently with Dev Patel. So these kinds of films work for me. So yeah, I like this trailer. This was a lot of fun. I don't expect much from the movie, so it's going to be a fun Saturday afternoon to watch while I'm cleaning the house or something. So yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got those 87 North vibes as well. I mean, this is like the normal guy that's thrown into the extraordinary situation. And this one comes out March 14th, a literal month after John will be underwhelmed by the Gorge on Apple.
I did. That's the time for St. Patrick's Day.
So that brings us to our last trailer, one that I caught a little bit of grief from one of our fellow Geek Buddies about my reticence to see it. We get the trailer for 28 Years Later. This is the third in the Danny Boyle zombie epic that started out with 28 Days Later, that starred Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy, who is credited in the movie. Some people think that he's actually popping up in the trailer. Some artist came out and said, nope, that's not Cillian Murphy, that's me. In either case, Danny Boyle is back 28 years later after the zombie apocalypse, and this one stars Aaron Taylor Johnson, Ray Fiennes, Jodie Comer, Aaron Kellyman, and Jack O'Connell. Fast zombies scare the crap out of me. like The Walking Dead, I could always deal with because it's just kind of like, all right, as long as you don't go into an abandoned building, you should see these guys coming. 28 Days Later zombies are fast. They're way scarier. So will I see this? Who knows? Johnny, what did you think of our first look at 28 Years Later?
Yeah, before we get shit on the comments, it's the rage virus. We know it's not typical zombie stuff. Everybody calm down. We get it. We know the franchise. So yeah, so this was a perfect variation I think I remember us driving down to see this, Michael. I think you and Ian and I drove down to see this or the sequel in San Diego because we got a bug up our asses one night and drove down to see an early screening of 28 Days or 28 Weeks Later and had a good time with it. So I'm excited to see this. Alex Garland writing it with Danny Boyle directing it. That makes me crazy excited. I think Aaron Taylor Johnson's a good actor. He's the best part of Craven, for God's sake. So I like seeing him lead another franchise. Where are we going? And what's this community aspect of it all? Is this something that Cillian Murphy's character created in order to help people function? So what is these Tower of Skulls? What is Ray Fiennes' version of Terry O'Quinn doing in this particular film? So much about this work. This trailer was fucking crazy. And then using that Rudyard Kipling poem, which is an actual recording that is used to torture people that are prisoners for the United States and for the UK throughout the history of the last few decades, is even more insane to add to this trailer and the vibe that we're getting. And what is that thing that's moving that we only see from the back there in one of those shots? Scare the fuck out of me. So yeah, I'm 100% on board with this, even though I'm going to be probably under my theater seat when I see it.
Mikey, that thing that was moving, would you call that a mutant? I don't know. What did you think of our first look at 28 Years Later?
Yeah, I have a friend who loves zombie movies, and she doesn't like when zombies go mutated, and so this one didn't do it for her, but she doesn't feel that is scientifically accurate.
Oh boy.
I, on the other hand, I'm excited. Unlike Shannon, I like going to movies that are scary. And I think that 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later were both great movies. You know, the whole zombie genre has gotten a lot of different takes on things. But, you know, I mean, it's like all the way back to the original black and white Night of the Living Dead to all of those movies to, you know, I still think Zack Snyder's Day at the Dawn of the Dead is one of the best things he's made. I love all the different permutations of zombie movies. I love the entire concept of it. I loved The Walking Dead until I didn't. And this world of zombies is one that's gonna, you know, it's actually one that I kind of had stopped thinking about. Like, to be honest, I think 28 Days Later and 28 Weeks Later are great movies, but I haven't revisited them in years. And so for this movie to come out now and kind of go, okay, well, like, let's take this out and let's see, you know, I mean, I think most zombie movies deal with, I think the fear we have is, and like everybody talks about it, you're like drinking with your friends, you're like, what would we do if a zombie apocalypse broke out right now? Like, there's the immediacy of like, what do we do when society collapses? That's part inherently of the zombie genre. To kind of go, well, what happens years and years after society collapsed? Where do we end up? And you know, The Last of Us touches on that in some ways, but I think that's a really interesting thing to deal with. So I'm really excited. Like John said, I mean, like this is all A+ talent all around. So from in front of the camera, behind the camera, I'm super, super stoked, and it makes me want to go revisit the other movies to sort of gear myself up and get ready. And that's when I know I'm really into it. Like when I want to go back and rewatch the stuff and go, okay, let me prepare myself, let me get ready. So I am very on board, and I think we're probably going to end up dragging Shannon to see this.
Oh God, yes. We need to attach a camera to your neck that shows what your reactions to this.
Yeah, maybe not. Well, in any case, 28 years later comes out in about 28 weeks on June 20th, 2025.
All right, let's move on to our spoiler review here of Creature Commandos episode 3. This one featured our boy here, where am I putting it? GI Robot here was the focus of this particular episode. We get the backstory with him. We see his obsession with killing Nazis. And by the end, we may have said goodbye to our favorite Nazi-killing robot here as we saw him battle the forces there with Cersei and the rest of the crew getting involved here in Creature Commandos for the 3rd episode of this series. And Ilana herself had to fight her way out of the situations that she was going into. So, Michael, what are your overall thoughts on this episode? What stood out to you? What worked for you? Or what are your thoughts? Not overall, just what are your thoughts? What worked for you? What didn't? Feel free to spoil anything you want to spoil.
Overall, I texted some friends who work over at Max, and I told them I'm loving the show. Like, I think it's great. I had a blast. I love that we sort of focused on GI Robot, and I love sort of getting his backstory throughout all of this. It's like they did a good job to me of really focusing on GI Robot, filling out his backstory, while at the same time continuing this whole, like, what is it that Cersei really wants? Ending on Cersei kind of saying, like, you've doomed the world. So, like, you know, everything isn't quite what it appears to be. So, like, what's happening in modern, in like the A story of Creature Commandos is interesting. GI Robot's backstory was great, really fun. Also, James Gunn does a good job to me of doing I'm going to sort of shock you and be ridiculous and over the top while at the same time being heartfelt and tugging at your heartstrings. And I think the GI Robot story did that. And on top of all that, I think he's continuing to drop some pretty big hints about where he wants to go in his DC universe. I mean, Will Magnus showing up in the middle of this episode, kind of apropos of nothing, and implying that he kind of took a lot of what made GI Robot tick, and that's going to lead into him creating the Metal Men. If you know who the Metal Men are in the comics, kind of leans towards, okay, it looks like whether it's in animation or somewhere in some movie, like James Gunn at least has the intention of maybe the Metal Men showing up, which would be really interesting. And so all in all, like, I'm just kind of charmed by this show. I think it's so bizarre and weird, and I'm enjoying the fact that, again, like we said last week, that James Gunn has sort of chosen to sort of launch the DC universe with an animated show, B, to do it with characters that nobody fucking knows, and C, to make them all so compelling that I actively want to see more of these characters both in animation and live action.
Yeah. Shannon, your thoughts on this episode? What stood out to you? What worked for you? Any reservations on this episode?
No, not at all. I mean, I don't think all of James Gunn's comedy lands, but I would say the overwhelming majority does. I mean, just like Guardians Volume 2, like there were definitely jokes in that I'm like, God, man, I wish this one would have hit the cutting room floor. But by and large, it was super, super funny. The thing that really stood out to me was the performance of Sean Gunn as GI Robot. I mean, my familiarity with Sean Gunn's work is pretty limited to what he has done with his brother. Like, I know that he was on Gilmore Girls, but every time I've heard Sean Gunn speak, it's either as Kraglin or as Calendar Man. So some sort of affectation. Listen to him basically, I mean, it's a robot voice, but it's pretty straightforward. Listening to him as GI Robot, and I'm kind of like, all right, GI Robot, Kraglin, Calendar Man. I'm like, maybe he is going to be an interesting Maxwell Lord for Superman. I think the initial announcement of that casting, I was like, yeah, you always look out for your brother, but I'm like, I don't know if this is the role. Literally just listening to him as GI Robot, I was like, okay, maybe spoke too soon. The backstory on GI Robot was great. I mean, just like the first 2 episodes, getting the backstory of the bride. I mean, the modern story, the current story is good. It's fine. That's our adventure. But as the way we're getting to know these characters, and if you looked at the comment, for the preview for next week, knowing that we're going to see another one of Sean Gunn's characters, it's just a really, really compelling story. And I think that's something James Gunn does really well with characters, is taking a robot and making them super sympathetic and super intriguing from beginning to end. I really, really enjoyed the episode, and it still does have that distinct James Gunn feel. All the needle drops as G.I. Robot is laying waste to dudes in front of him. It is just sort of, you get away with a lot in animation, like watching the carnage. But I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. Oh, there goes an eyeball. So yeah, I was a big fan of this episode, and I can't wait to see more of the show.
You want to talk about a John Roca episode? This is a John Roca episode. Gets to kill Nazis, gets to make a commentary on Nazis coming back and what we should do to Nazis as they're coming back. But he gets in trouble for it because the government doesn't want to look at the fact that they were Nazis. They want to look at the fact he killed 34 quote unquote innocent men. And so it gets in trouble, gets shuttered away. They don't want to confront what they did, so they just shove it in the background there. He doesn't end up in a crate like in Raiders of the Lost Ark. He ends up in some dude's comic book shop that he sells and goes. So I liked the story here. And you got the introduction of Sergeant Rock, which I thought was great. Michael, you bring up the Metal Man. That's a great point that I didn't even catch when I was watching it. So that makes me love this even more. There's a genius here. I know people want to come after me for my comments last week. I'll take the shit. But like James Gunn, this is genius here. For us who are comic book nerds, the fact that he's starting out this way and hinting at things and directions he may be going, it gets us excited. It gets us excited, and he's doing it in an animated series that's damn good with great performances, as Shannon was pointing out about Sean Gunn. He brought, you cared for G.I. Robot by the end of the episode, so that when what happened to him, you were legitimately hurt. You know, the connection with him and his friend Nina. You know, that whole thing that's going there, I thought that was very sweet as well. And then the flashbacks, right? Because he's programmed to do one thing, and it gives him life, and it excites him. And so he's always looking for who are the Nazis. And then the way the animation does, the inventiveness of how he's not just shooting one. Oh, we can do 3 now. Like it ups and ups and ups. All of it just works so well. And then everyone gets their chance to sign. Weasel going after Cersei, which was brutal and bloody. The goriness of the kills were all great, and the crew coming together to fight and having to run against the time and all of that, and even the Alana scene, which is basically a commentary on how men will physically abuse women any chance they get a chance to, and the way she fights back, I thought was very strong as well. So a lot of this episode worked for me thematically and message wise, but also animation, story, and performance wise as well, and furthering the overall story of what we got coming up with this series.
So just to clarify then, gratuitous violence is okay. It's the gratuitous sexy stuff that we don't like.
I didn't feel the violence was gratuitous. That's you saying that. Oh, the violence was perfect measure of violence. Perfect.
You didn't think like close-ups of heads exploding and eyeballs flying at screens was okay.
That's my kind of language, baby. That's my kind of language.
I literally thought of you during the episode because I was like, I'm gonna go ahead and bet that the extreme, because like it is, I will say, like, to your point, I think part of what James Gunn's background as a director is, and kind of coming from like a lot of the schlocky stuff that he really loves, like James Gunn does love to shock his audiences.
Yes.
And 100%. I think that some of the stuff he did with like the sex scene in the first episode is very James Gunn. But I also think the extreme graphic violence, like dudes like trying to shove their intestines back into their bodies in animation, is equally as gratuitous. But I was like, Johnny's gonna love this violence, but the sex stuff really bugs him, and it's pretty much the same thing.
That's I don't know how you have sex, but violence is not part of my sex. But I don't necessarily.
Gratuitous, putting something in animation or live action that is gratuitous to be like, look how shocking this is the same thing. But it is interesting to me how one is clutching the pearls and one is like, yes, give me more of this.
I think you don't want to understand it. I know you're going to.
I understand it fine. I understand
that like condescending tone you like to give, but I'm telling you right now that I think there's a difference. And it's opinion. It's opinion. That's gratuitous. Some of the I didn't think it was necessary. It didn't advance the plot. Him killing Nazis to the point that they were trying to put their guts in their bodies, I could care less. I love it. I thought it was great. That advanced the story. You have to know that he is this thing and the brutality that he can administer so that when he kills the Nazis in modern day, you know that it was a brutal scene and you understand why they put him away and did what they did. So there's this, to me, it's all advancing the story. And even the violence with Ilana getting attacked, the way they were going to essentially, they beat her up and then she had to use the gun and did what she did. I thought all of that was perfect. So to me, it's not gratuitous, the violence. It all advanced the plot.
I feel like I'm doing these Creature Commandos reviews with the church ladies over here.
What, the church lady who likes violence?
I was just curious where you were going when you said putting something in, and I'm like, oh, where are we going? And then you followed it with animation.
No, I do. Yeah. But look, it's all personal, right? It's what your point of view is in what your subjective feeling is, what works for you, what doesn't work for you. I don't think there is hypocrisy here. It's more a matter of what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And for some people, it was not gratuitous. And for some people, it was. Quite a few people have said it was gratuitous, the sexual stuff from the last episode. And I'm sure some people will say, as you said, Michael, that the violence was gratuitous here. But then there were people like me who thought the violence was the perfect amount and not gratuitous at all. So it's all perspective. I mean, what, you don't think it's all? You don't think art is subjective?
No, I do think art is subjective. I just think it's like it's the distinction of like what, like, I think that both are gratuitous. I think both are also serving story. Like, I think I think James Gunn's style and the style here, it's the same as Invincible. Invincible is very specifically, we are going to show gratuitous violence to be shocking, to make a point. James Gunn's part of his vibe across the board is he wants this to be gratuitous. I think it's the saying that one is gratuitous and one isn't is the part that I disagree with.
Okay, that's fair. You can disagree with it. Shannon, I know we got to wrap up. So do you have final thoughts or overall thoughts on, or any final overall thoughts on this episode?
I mean, Vogel's pointed out already, like the fact that this was a conscious choice to start the new DC universe with this show, something that is so kind of out there that, you know, Amanda Waller has this squad of soldiers who are all, you know, non-human. Like it's super, super interesting. And it's just a really enjoyable show for me. I mean, I can see where this would not be everybody's bag, especially, you know, when you're making a big cinematic universe, you want to appeal to families. And families might see like, oh, what's this new thing? And it's like, oh yeah, don't let kids watch this. This is a very grown up, this is a very adult show. But across the board, all the characters are super intriguing, and I'm, you know, curious to see where else it's gonna go.
I don't know teenagers nowadays. Go ahead.
But no, like we've been saying, like already, you know, James Gunn has been really clear that he's not, again, we've talked about this a ton, but I think Creature Commandos is really showing it in action, which is he's like, we're not doing the Marvel Tony Stark got out of the cave and that was the beginning of the superhero universe. Like Superman is going to take place modern day, but already in just these few episodes, we know that G.I. Robot was with Sergeant Rock, like back in the day, and that Will Magnus at a certain period in history was inspired by G.I. Robot to build the Metal Men, and that Themyscira in modern day is seen as this mythological place that may or may not exist. So we're already getting all of these pieces of information so that by the time we get to Superman, you know, and we see Rick Flag there with Superman and everybody else, like there's already sort of this sense of history and that these extraordinary characters have already been placed throughout history. And so it's giving James Gunn a really, really wide timeline to start to play with. So when we might see Wonder Woman, when we might see some of these, when we might see the Justice Society, like we might see the Justice Society in a period piece that could be really interesting. So I think that he's really setting us up for potentially in success. He could do a lot of really, really interesting things.
Yeah, a lived-in world that he can inhabit and play with. Absolutely. It's a great point, Mike. And the way that the episode ends, Circe is saying you've doomed the world, as you pointed out, Michael, and that's about Alana. And Alana was the one seducing Rick Flag Sr., and we suspected that there's something more going on. So clearly there's something more with Alana that we're going to discover as the mystery unfolds. So It keeps us hanging on with that.
Almost seems like that seduction might be important to the story. I don't know.
Sure, and you could have shot it better without showing any nudity. All right, let's wrap up this episode of the Geek Buddies.
Isn't that special?
Thank you so much for joining us. We had so much fun talking all of these topics. Hope you enjoyed it as well. Shannon, what do we have to tell them?
Yeah, I'd like to follow us on social media. On Twitter, it's @geek_buddies. On Instagram, at @the_geek_buddies. You'd like to follow me on social media. I promise next time it won't look like this. I'll do a better job. It's on Twitter, it's @Shannon_McClung. On Instagram, it's Shannon the Geek Buddy. If you'd like to follow Mr. Vogel, it is @MKToon. If you'd like to follow Mr. Roca, it is @The Roca Says.
Thank you.
Go ahead and smash that like button below. Subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page. Check out all the amazing content he has got going on there. Go ahead and leave your comments below. What do you think of the trailers? What do you think of the death of the Sony Spider-Man universe? What do you think of Captain America coming back as Nomad? And most importantly, what do you think of violence and sex in animated TV shows? Let us know in the comments below.
Okay.
Johnny's going to love to respond to these. I got to tell you that. Go ahead and leave us some stars and some comments in the podcast rankings so we can go up and more people can find us. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
Hey, I'm done commenting on YouTube this week. I tried to explain positions to people and they just want to fight, and I don't need to be involved in that. Thank you all so much. Take care of yourselves. Be well. Enjoy the weekend, and we'll be back next week with some more content here on the
Geek
Buddies!
Hey! All right, thank you, gentlemen. I will have